Friends, good evening. Thank you for taking time to come amidst the fears of Corona, beating out the traffic and finding a parking place over here. All of this reflects the kind of enthusiasm you all carry to listen to this very thought-provoking talk at the National Film Archives of India in Pune today. As my firm CCBA Design celebrates 25 years of architectural practice this year, we bring to you one of the very first events of hosting Dr. Bimal Patel this evening. Friends, as the founder director of the India House Art Gallery that sponsors major art events and notably the only annual international film festival on architecture and urbanism with the cooperation of film directors from all across the globe and quite a few programs of such intellectual nature, we like to engage the audience of Pune to understand the ongoing urban transformation. My life over the past quarter century as the managing director of CCBA Designs and as a close associate of Christopher Benninger has brought me in close contact with thought leaders in the field of architecture and urban planning such as Fumi Komaki, Richard Rogers, Padma Bhushan Balkrishna Doshi, Pei Cobb and Fried, along with younger designers like Rajiv Khatpalia, Pradeep Sachdev, organizations such as UDRI, and my friend Padma Shri, Dr. Bimal Patel, who is here with us tonight. Friends, let us welcome him with a very big round of applause. Bimal, it is an honor for us to have you amongst us this evening with us. Thank you very much for coming. Our association with urban design at CCBA Design stretches way back to Christopher's youth studying under Jose Luis Sert, arguably the father of urban design, and studying under him at Harvard, where Sert initiated the very first course at urban design way back in 1956. Other thought leaders such as Dolph Schnabely from Zurich, Kenneth Frampton, Roger Montgomery from New York have inspired me over dinners and cogent meetings in our travels of the past decades. All of these people educated me to think about a simple point that there is a huge missing link between the design of individual buildings and the planning of the cities, with the victim being our loss of the public spaces where we walk, where people meet and gather together in our cities. While working alongside Christopher on the urban design of the Royal Capital Complex of Bhutan, where we were integrating national icons such as Supreme Court of Bhutan and the National Ceremonial Plaza, within the National Capital Plan that we were preparing, I understood such complexities in these projects. Our work in China, where we are creating a large urban space in Sri Lanka, we have prepared city plans, and in projects such as IIT Hyderabad and Ajit Premji University in Bengaluru, which are no less than large urban campuses, I came to understand the complexities of these designs. Often the mere scale of large projects makes it undeniable component of large building block of a larger urban fabric. It struck me a few months ago while talking to Dr. Bimal Patel about his work over a quiet dinner that I should invite him over to Pune to share with us his ideas on urban transformation in the form of a presentation of his recent involvement with several major urban interventions in India. He graciously agreed to join us here this evening. As you all may know, Dr. Patel completed his degree in architecture from CEPT and continued his studies at University of California, Berkeley, and obtaining his master's degree in urban design, followed by a PhD in urban planning, winning the Aga Khan Award for Architecture during that period for his design of the Entrepreneurship Development Institute of India. Upon his return to India, he made headlines by proposing to the political, administrative, and business leaders of Ahmedabad that employing urban design as a social tool, they could transform a congested and crowded business street into a pedestrian-friendly public space while providing parking and seamless traffic movement along CG Road in the heart of Ahmedabad. The success of this complex design revealed a method by which diverse stakeholders of the city could find a balance within their interests and jointly create a better place for people to live. His new campus of IIM Ahmedabad adjacent to the old campus and his Ahmedabad Management Association established him as a major design practitioner in India. Building on these achievements, Dr. Patel made successful proposals for streamlining the town planning scheme legislation in the state of Gujarat. His proposals eased implementation procedures in a manner that land was pooled into a land bank from which public areas for parks, roads, and amenities could be taken proportionately from each owner's share of land, obviating the menace of earmarking reserved areas from a few individual landowners who became victims of urban planning. This approach made all of the participant winners, though through vastly enhanced land values of well laid out plots facing good roads in pleasant neighborhoods with parks and amenities. Dr. Patel spent years preparing local area plans as part of Ahmedabad's larger master plan, familiarizing him with the roles of politicians, business interests, civic groups, and environmental issues. I'm noting these projects as you may think that suddenly good luck landed Dr. Patel important commissions, while in fact, years of hard work preceded his present commissions. Dr. Patel's good fortune was to continue the practice of his father, Hasmukh C. Patel, who over decades put in place one of the very few professionally managed practices in India, emphasizing timely, well-designed deliverables within budgets as a priority over creating publishable and eye-catching fantasies. Dr. Patel employed the state-of-the-art management systems to carry out award-winning architectural and planning projects across India. Meanwhile, Ahmedabad was rapidly transforming, with businesses booming, population swelling, and with the Sabarmati River being designated as the main conduit carrying Narmada Canal water upstream as the major passage through the city out into the drought-prone areas of Saurashtra. Suddenly the river would be running backwards and upwards instead of downwards, and a dry riverbed would become a full body of water. Many design studios across India made proposals for developing the riverfront, but these lacked an understanding of the need for a financial model creating sellable land parcels on a small portion of the land whose income would assist financing the larger plan. Most of the proposals neglected the fact that once in 2 decades, the river floods, washing away all the hutments alongside in the banks and wreaking havoc within the city. Like London, Rome, Paris, Ahmedabad would need a flood wall with a pedestrian quay along the riverfront, gifting the city a retreat from the humdrum of congested life nearby. By addressing these issues, Dr. Patel would convince city leaders of a feasible approach. He was accordingly commissioned to carry out this complex project budgeted at rupees 11,000 crores, while an equal amount of large projects of rupees 10,000 crores were allocated for rehousing the squatters in the riverbed. This was commissioned to other design firms. Thus began Free India's largest civic intervention employing urban design to create pedestrian walkways linked to gardens above, breakout areas with boating docks on a virtual urban lake, sitting areas along a large promenade, cycling paths, and most important for those in the old walled city bereft of any open spaces at all, access to their first and only public space running many kilometers along the riverfront. This short review brings us to Dr. Patel's presentation this evening of 3 important urban design plans currently in the conceptual stage, which he has graciously agreed to share with us all. As Professor Benninger has often noted, planning initiative throughout history has always been acts of strong political will and a convergence of stakeholders' capabilities to change the status quo whether it was creating the Rue de Rivoli, or the Champs-Élysées, Central Park in New York, or the Lutyens plan for New Delhi. All of these mirrored the strategies and visions of commercial and political leaders of their times. On the other hand, contemporary cities have mushroomed organically through ad hoc commercial investments, robbing our cities of public domains, open spaces, and crowding out existing pedestrian areas and community meeting places. In India, once beautiful hill towns have become slums. Religious spaces around temples and mosques have become vendors' bazaars, and once pleasant pedestrian streets and lanes and alleys have been encroached upon by beyond recognition, often making access to iconic destinations nearly impossible. Due to lack of vision, vast urban areas like the Mumbai Trust docklands covering 10% of the land of the island city have become derelict centers of neglect, centers of pollution, refuge dumps, illegal godowns, and places for offloading toxic materials, as in the case of eastern seaboard of Mumbai. The Central Vista is envisioned as a monument to foreign colonial rule and top-down despotic control over the enslaved people of India, slowly adjusted and morphed into an unplanned working place where 70,000 people come and go on a daily basis, carrying out the governance of the world's largest democracy. Massive additions planned and designed by the Central Public Works Department began to characterize the Central Vista. What was once a large public gathering space became the traffic center of the metropolis, with lakhs of buses, scooters, two-wheelers and cars crossing the Central Vista daily, blocking pedestrian access to the central gardens and the open spaces. The Parliament House, originally envisioned as a place for hand-picked cronies of the British Raj to voice their elite views of the nation's problems, necessarily became the centerpiece of representative democracy. With the inadequate seating to keep pace with a fair representation proportionate to the population of India. At CCBA Designs, we became very aware of the Central Vista's issues when Professor Benninger was the chairperson of the recently completed National War Memorial created near India Gate on the Rajpath. Likewise, as a member of the Government of India appointed to analyze and create a strategy for the development of the Mumbai docklands, Professor Benninger became alerted to the massive toxic pollution on the eastern seaboard, the existence of derelict buildings, and a huge urban wasteland, massive squatting by businesses, and total misuse of vast urban lands within the city that has the least public open space per capita. A metropolis starved for open space and denied access to a beautiful waterfront was squandering its potential public open spaces and seaboard assets through neglect and lack of urban design initiatives. Finally, the Kashi Vishwanath sacred precinct of Varanasi has become, over the past century, bereft of any public order or people-oriented design. Vendors, illegal shops, gerrymandering residences have blocked passages to the temple areas, even building illegal buildings and structures over existing small temples and votive pavilions. While foreign tourists find the chaos, dirt, and congestion exotic and intriguing, the fact is that this iconic national asset has become unhygienic, unruly, and cut off visually from the Varanasi Ghats, more so from the sacred riverfront. It is one of those places awaiting disaster in the form of stampedes, fires, or building collapses. Just as Pradeep Sachdev is preparing a new urban design development plan for Jama Masjid in Old Delhi, Dr. Patel was asked to take up this urban planning conundrum and to offer solutions. So, I present to you Padma Shri Dr. Bimal Patel to explain the challenges, processes, and urban design possibilities in dealing with these difficult situations and challenges to India's future. Thank you very much, Dr. Bimal Patel.
First of all, Ram, thank you for this extremely generous introduction. Thank you for inviting me here. Thank you for all the effort you make to make these sort of events work well. I've seen the work that goes behind it. Thank you very much. I'm particularly honored that CCBA has organized this. I've known Christopher Benninger for many years now. He knew me as a child. He's a friend of my father's. And then we get to know each other professionally as professionals. When he switched back to architecture, that's the first time we really made contact. And I've always admired Christopher for his practice, for his integrity, for his untiring efforts to advance the cause of architecture and planning in the country. From starting a school for urban planning at CEPT many years ago, and subsequently all the support that he provides lots of different people. I am definitely one of those that he has encouraged through his kind words, real deeds, and thank you very much, Christopher, for everything that you have done for the profession and personally for the work that I've done, all the encouragement that you have given over the years. And thank you all for coming. It's an honor to have all of you here. We have a very ambitious agenda in front of us. I don't know if it can be actually achieved, but I'm going to try to run you through the key issues in 6:30 now. In not 3, but actually 4 projects. It's become a little more ambitious since Ram asked me to talk about 3 projects. I've done the 3 projects once earlier. I've done only one other presentation that is longer than this one. Let's see if it works. So I'm going to talk about modernizing Indian cities. No, I'm fine just now. If I need it, I'll do that. I'm going to talk about modernizing Indian cities. That's the big agenda. I think we live at a time, a very, very special, important time in India. India is going through an epochal revolution. We are becoming urban. And every country in the world that has become urban has had to tackle the challenge of making its cities function well. We go to all these wonderful cities in the West, and we like to go there as tourists. God did not give them these cities ready-made. They too industrialized. The Western world also messed up its cities. You all have to you can easily Google and find the history. If you just do 19th century cities in Europe, you will see images, etc. They worked hard, they tackled the problems, and they modernized their cities. They did this at the time when it was a different time. They had some advantages, they had some disadvantages. We have our own advantages, we have our own disadvantages. One of our biggest advantages is the fact that we are latecomers to this process, and we can learn a lot from the processes abroad. We have disadvantages too, because we have larger numbers, we are a poorer country, we have democratic institutions far ahead of all the other revolutions that have taken place. So we have our challenges to tackle. And it's depending on how well we tackle the challenge of modernizing our cities, we'll either come out of this whole process winners or otherwise as losers. Because countries that have not managed their urbanization process well have got stuck at lower levels of productivity and very, very problematic social situations. I have spent a lifetime trying to figure out how we might tackle the challenge of modernizing India's cities. And so I'm not going to talk about the very early projects, but I'm going to talk about 1 complete project and 3 ongoing projects. So let's go for it. It's a marathon, but let's see where we go. We start with Sabarmati Riverfront Development. I'm not going to talk about this project in detail. I wanted to put this one up first because if I just showed ongoing projects, there would be plans, and you'd wonder whether these can ever be realized. So I wanted to put up one project that is actually realized. I've worked on it for, I think, 23 years now. I just want to quickly explain what the project is and show you some images of where, what this project looks like today. So first, let's look at Sabarmati in the regional context. Here's Gujarat, quite clearly. That's Aravalli Hills here. That's the Gulf of Cambay. Here is the river Sabarmati flowing down from the Aravalli Hills, going past Ahmedabad into Gulf of Cambay. All the rain that falls in this area here used to gush past Ahmedabad and bring many major floods. This is in 1973, major floods to the city. It's a sandy river, sandy banks, used to cause lots of damage to the city. At that time, the municipal corporation in 1976 built, along with the state government, it built some dams here, as you can see, and this much area was brought under control. This much of the catchment was brought under control. Having done this, we still get floods, but they are only when the dams are opened. This is like in Pune. When that was done, when these dams were built, there was also a barrage built downstream of Ahmedabad here, and that was for irrigation. This barrage is a shallow, it's a low barrage, so 20-foot high wall, and that would hold water in the river after the monsoon, and the river started looking like this. So we had a seasonal lake in the middle of the city since 1976. Few months after monsoon, we would have water, and then it would go away as soon as the water was used up for irrigation. It would be empty riverbed, and the river would start looking like this once again. Then, at that time, after that, the Narmada Dam was built, and as Ram explained, there was a canal that was built to take water up to North Gujarat and to Saurashtra, and that happened to go past Ahmedabad, just upstream of the city. Once this canal was built, we had a possibility of taking water from the canal and putting it into the river for irrigation. Now this made it possible for Ahmedabad to have a perennial lake in the middle of the city. All of this happened without any reference to Ahmedabad. This is for irrigation, this is for flood control, and none of it had to do anything with the riverfront project. Once this lake got done in the middle of the city, we have this sort of a lake. You can see this river is sloping down from here to here. Here's the barrage, and therefore there is deep water here, and then slowly there's shallow water here. It's like a swimming pool. The bottom is sloping. Okay. We had a landscape full of lakes earlier. Now we had a large lake in the middle of the city. Now, we had a lake. It's not in very good shape. Sabarmati at the turn of the century, where it passed through Ahmedabad, you can see Ahmedabad was established on Sabarmati River here, 1850, and then it grew on both sides. Today it occupies something like 300 kilometers on both sides of the river. But like all cities in the country, and I'd say the world, when the city industrialized and became a large city, it started treating the river poorly, much like the Pune River here. It became a place to dump garbage. There were stormwater drains that were bringing sewage, untreated sewage, directly into the river. So there was more sewage than there was water many times. It became a place where you had slums. This is where poor people built their hutments on the banks of the river. The slums had no services, so sewage from that would come directly into the river. And the slums also ended up reducing the flood carrying capacity of the river, because as soon as water was released, these people would get flooded. The development on both sides was lackluster and really very, very, it was the back of the buildings rather than the front of the buildings that face the river. And most importantly, along this entire river, there was no public space. All the properties came right up to the edge of the river. And if you wanted to walk along the length of the river, there was no public domain within which you could walk. That's what the river looked like at the turn of the century. Okay, and that's an artist's impression here, and that's the state of the river. Slums, laundry washing, sewage here, no public space for people to walk on. The Sabarmati Development Project, we first worked out its feasibility, a comprehensive plan in 1998 when it was done. This addressed all the issues from physical features of the river to infrastructure, to resettlement, to project cost. Everything was worked out. That's not very difficult. After that, I was, my firm was a manager to the project, not a designer to the project. Our job was to make the project happen. So I played that role also, and I learned a lot. That's me explaining the project in 98 or 99 to lots of people. There was lots of explaining to do. I used to have black hair then. There's, that's a workshop that we held with all the professionals of the city. I don't know which year this was. It took a long time for the project to get developed. You can see the project got started in 2004. At that time, there was a Congress government in the city, and the state had a BJP government. That's the Prime Minister. Then he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. We did many exhibitions where we showed the project to people, large models, large drawings. This is 20 years of work I'm trying to put into 25 slides. There were lots of people who came and saw the project. There were rich people who came and decided what they were going to buy in this place. There were high court cases. There were NGOs. There were activists looking at what was being done, trying to stall it. High Court monitored whatever was being done. There was lots of fake news floated about this project. Such as this, for example, where it's claimed that this project is all for the developers, not for the city. There were awards we got. This was 2002. This was that time I think Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister. And on the project, we made many techniques we developed to visualize the project and show it to people. We would have a photograph like this and then try to show. These were large drawings we made. We made exhibitions of this sort to try and show to people what the riverfront is going to be like. And finally, the project saw the light of day and it happened. Today, Sabarmati River has a riverfront that is accessible for everybody, which means that in this river, we built embankments on both sides and reclaimed land, like in Marine Drive. This is one picture. You can see the wall being built. This is the reclamation work. It's a huge amount of work. It's not very sophisticated work, but it's just large. The river used to look like this in 2001. And here you can see in 2006, the work has started here. And 2009 and 15, and that's now the river with a public realm on both sides of the city. A river that used to look like this, today looks like this. It has, and like this, it looks like this. So this is lots of space that was created. It's a river without sewage. All this sewage that used to come in has been diverted through interceptor sewers. And this is the sewer being built. And the water is now more or less clean. There is still somewhere pending. It's a river for recharging groundwater, and the sewage treatment plants treat the water and put it back into the river so that we have a grand recharge mechanism. This work is ongoing, but there are other plants that have already started. It's a river without slums. 11,000 families were given housing in all these red spot areas within the city, And you can see the houses were of this sort, and that is kind of interior view of one of the happy homes that was built. So 11,000 households. The project, I think Ram made a statement, it was not 11,000 crores, it was 1,100 crores. And the project cost was 1,200 crores. This is the cost of 2 5-star hotels. Okay, 2 5-star hotels is the cost of the entire project. Anyways, no risk of flooding. Ahmedabad river used to flood, and everybody who could afford it had built walls of this sort. Now there is a common wall, and you can see the river in flood here. The lower level is submerged, but next day, after the water recedes, it becomes once again usable place. It has to be cleaned up a little bit. It's a riverfront with parks and promenades. You can see there are many new parks along the river. Okay, and that's the kind of, that was when it was opened up in 2012. That's from 2012. It became a place of pride for the city. Here's in the monsoon, and here's people sitting there. It's a place for all sections of society. You can see here, and that boating and exercising, and there are parks of this sort. This is a picture from 7 years ago. That's a new park that is coming up shortly. So it's a riverfront with many amenities. That's a huge open-air market for poor people. It's the flea market of Ahmedabad that you can see here. It's a Sunday market, which it was claimed was being wiped out. Here that's the kind of market that you have in place. These trees have also grown. They will also grow more. This is a laundry facility for all the dhobis who used to be there, and it has a revitalized. This project has revitalized the city center. You can see many new projects coming up along the riverfront. All the developers are advertising their projects along with the riverfront. They are also paying for their FSI, so the city has a new income source. Here are some other projects. These are from developers' brochures, and here are places like this from which you can enjoy the river view. We have a better street network. We used to have a poor street network, north to south, and this new street network was added because of the project. And this is one of the views of the streets. Here's another view of the street. There you are, that's another view. It's a self-financing project, no taxpayer money to be used here. It's a project that costs 1,200 crores to build. If you take the housing, it's another 1,100, so 2,400 crores. That's with interest. And these patches of land, the blue spots, are to be sold to recover all of that money. That's, for example, a patch along which small portions will be sold. And maybe something like this will come up. So it's a project that has made Ahmedabad citizens proud of their riverfront. So this is, in a sense, a proof that projects like this can be done despite our fractious and difficult democracy. We don't need to be like a very authoritarian government. We can still do projects. They have to be structured in a certain way. They have to bring benefits for everybody. They have to make sense for a large number of people. And you have to implement these projects well. So that's the proof that some of the rest that I'm going to talk about can actually happen. Okay? So let's start with the Mumbai project. So that's one of the 3 ongoing projects that I'm going to talk about. So the opportunity. Now you see that's Mumbai here. That's Marine Drive here. And normally we see this edge of Mumbai. This is where that big bridge is. And we see the western side of the Mumbai city. Eastern side, all of this is the port of Mumbai. Actually, this used to be the original port, but when the city grew, the port got choked up. And so this port, all its activity was shifted to this JNPT, Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust. So As a consequence, the original port has now very few activities, and this is no longer serving as the prime port of Mumbai. And here you have some activities continue, like cruise terminal, international cruise terminal, but a lot of the land here looks like this. It's a polluted waterfront. You can see here there are old buildings not in use, getting encroached upon. There's much waste of land, as you can see here, scrap yards of this sort. There are old warehouses that exist here, and there is large pieces of land that are simply not used in a city where land is scarce and where lots of development is needed. Ram already talked about this. In addition to this, the important thing to note is that all the new transport proposals that are being proposed, there's a metro line being proposed from North Mumbai right down to CST here. There's a Trans-Harbour link proposed here, which will connect the two sides of Mumbai here, Navi Mumbai, as well from here. There is a Ro-Ro terminal, Ro-Ro ferries coming out of here. There's a high-speed rail line proposed. Once these proposals all get built, this will be the most well-connected piece of land in Mumbai. So it's a terrific opportunity for the city to rejuvenate itself and for better use to be made of this land. Of course, as soon as this project comes up, the first thing that comes to mind is the Mumbai mill land issue, where the owners of the land, in this case the government of India, which means not some remote, which means all of us are the formal owners of this piece of land. And of course, we are interested in ensuring that if it's valuable land, we want to monetize this land. We want to ensure that this land is used in a way that brings benefits to the entire country. And of course, the people of Mumbai are also very keen, because they say this is our city, we have very few amenities, and we would like this land used in a way that helps Mumbai. The mill lands ended up in a big fight, and because of the way that whole fight was structured, that whole Mumbai city, in a sense, lost out, because finally they asked for too much and got nothing, in a sense. That's at least my view on the matter. So what was clear to us when we were designing it is that we would have to design it in a way that would turn a zero-sum game, a fight between the formal owners and the city, into a win-win game. And all urban design projects have to be like that. We think of everything as a zero-sum game. You see, there are activists who say, I will save every tree and everything else be damned. There are activists who say, I will save heritage buildings and everything else be damned. They are like people who are fighting for their roadside shrine, saying, I will save my shrine, the traffic be damned. We have to find that we have to figure out ways in which we turn such zero-sum games, you win, I lose, into win-win games, into situations where everybody wins something. I think the Sabarmati project essentially came through because nobody lost, everybody won out of it. Despite the fact that there were many activists and many people who were hollering away, saying that either this or nothing else, only green space, you can't sell land, you can't do this, you can't do that. Nothing. Eventually, the city people said, enough, we will do this project because everybody gets something out of it, and everybody has to therefore also compromise something. Everybody can't get everything with nobody compromising. Somebody has to compromise, and that's the art we have to learn, and that's the art we can teach through urban design. Okay, so that's what urban design has to be about. That's the sort of subtext you will see in all of the projects that I do here. So just first, let us look at what the urban design vision is. And I'm going to turn on a film, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, animation that tells you what this project is about. Are you going to turn it on? Me on? Okay. No. Can you hear me? No? Okay. Okay, I can't hear myself, sir. Okay, so that was just a sort of a visual of how we believe the Mumbai eastern waterfront might look like when it gets fully developed. But what are the ideas underpinning this vision? And what are the elements, urban design elements like? So since I think large portion of the audience is urban design, architects, etc., I'd like to focus on that issue, some of these ideas here. So here's what we see as the master plan. Here's another view of the same thing. And I want to say that it's made up of these many elements. Let's start with the first one. At the core of it, the plan is nothing but a strategically drawn street network. Okay? Here, that's the large piece of land that we're working with, about 7 square kilometers of land, and that's a dense street grid is at the heart of this plan. What we did to draw this is look at the existing streets in the port, because the port already had some streets. We decided to use many of those streets, perhaps widen them, use those alignments, we added more streets to them and came up with a grid that matched with the grid of rest of Mumbai. So this is not just the grid, not the grid of streets standing by itself, but also integrated with Mumbai streets. Just take a closer look at this. Actually, it's made up of 4 parcels for redevelopment. I'm going to look at the center one here, and that's what the existing streets look like. That's the streets that are added, and that's what the street network looks like. Of course, the street network is also hierarchical. It has functional hierarchy there, and it's been detailed with considerable amount of care. As you can see here, this is the design for the major streets like that. All the other streets have been detailed, and this is sort of the urban design vision for those streets. But what's important here, okay, it's not that. We forget as urban designers that the streets are at the heart of any planning assignment. At this stage of our development, the most important thing is to make adequate space for streets. Indian cities have very, very poor street networks. You can see here Ahmedabad, 16% of land and streets is poor because there's less land. It's also poor because this street is not a grid. And it doesn't have to be a straight grid like this. Grid means lots of nodes and topologically a grid. Mumbai also has a very poor street network. This is just a small example from there. But if you compare it to New York or Portland, our cities simply have less land devoted to streets. No wonder they don't function well enough. So space for streets has to be allocated at the outset. Though it's not impossible, it's very difficult to improve a street network once everything is built up. You can see that very clearly. Now, in another project that I'm not going to talk about today, we are talking about how to improve street networks in existing cities, but we'll not take that up today. Here, this is more or less a greenfield site, so we talk about how another one like this was done. In 1782, New York was a tiny town, that's Manhattan Island, and they were smart. At that time, they drew up a street grid that looked somewhat like this. They didn't even build all the streets, but they drew it up and then followed it like crazy right through. And once this was done, later on, you could develop the entire city. But the street space has to be left right in the beginning. And we don't manage to do that. Once you have streets, the city grows. No city grows once and for all. Big thing to remember in urban design is that cities change. That's New York in 1876. 1932, down here. Once you have a street network, you can turn that small town into the center of the world, in a sense. And here you have even more buildings that are planned. All these ones here are buildings that are still going to come up now. So the street grid is very important. Here's another city in Barcelona. It was a medieval fortified town at one point. You can see here with farmland all around, much like our cities today. And in this place, a planner drew up this grid of streets, a very famous grid of streets here, 9 times the size of their town. They didn't worry about expansion. They weren't worried about containing cities. They wanted cities to grow out in an orderly fashion. And here you have, that's what Barcelona looks like because the street grid was done. Street grids are very important. Once you have a street grid in place and you are able to get that space for streets, cities grow incrementally in unpredictable ways, and a street grid is the only frame that can hold a large urban development together. And so we focused first on the street grid. I'll tell you more about it as we go along. Once the grid is in place, something will come up. In this case, the land will get freed up slowly as the leases get over, and bits and pieces of the city will come up, and over a period of time, it will all fall into place. So it's not as if this is one grand vision to be realized on one day, but it's incremental development, uncoordinated, messy, you might say, but the street grid is what will hold it in place. Okay, so that's that and that. Second, public transit is very important, and more important is to integrate it with your street network. That's really important. I already told you there's lots of public transport planned for this area. The important thing is to integrate it with the fabric of the city and with the city streets. And that's what has been done here. You can see very carefully the metro alignment has been changed so that it matches with our street network. It takes a lot of work to bring all the agencies together, and that's the work that's involved in urban design. It's your coordinating function. You are nothing but a coordinator at that level. And then to see that all the stations from there, what are the walking distances and how do you get to all the stations. Integrated and upgradable infrastructure. So once again, once you have a street network, you can put in all the infrastructure that you need. You can put in the power supply, you can put in the water supply, you can think it all out and say how much will be needed and work out the sewerage strategy and the solid waste disposal strategy, etc. And then you can also work out on the street what are the ways in which you put in all your services. But the important thing is not that. The key insight to remember is that infrastructure of any city in the world is not built at one go. Nobody builds world-class infrastructure at one go. Everybody improves upon their infrastructure. So for all the people who say, have you done the infrastructure? I say, my friend, which city in the world has built its infrastructure on day one? What's important is leave adequate space and be ready to upgrade as the city grows. That's Hong Kong today. It's a fantastic metropolis in which there is tremendous amount of infrastructure. There are metros and there are ferries and there are buses and there are rail lines and there are tunnels and there are tubes and oh my God, the amount of infrastructure. But you know, at one time, Hong Kong used to look like this. And they didn't have the world-class infrastructure. And they didn't say that, oh, in 84 or in 1990 or 2000, we are going to be like this. They were like this. And then in the 60s, they were like this, and they thought they had arrived. And the infrastructure was meant to serve this development. And eventually, they became this. Cities do not have a natural carrying capacity. Carrying capacity of a city is dependent on the amount of infrastructure you put inside. So for all the people who say, oh my God, we are going to ruin this place, we don't have infrastructure for this, the answer should be build the infrastructure, my friend. Don't cry about the fact that you don't have infrastructure and limit growth by that. Because if you limit growth, you will create scarcities. And that is worse than anything else. So that brings you to the next. This is a plan that provides for ample and increasable floor space. I told you no city in the world is built at one go. Once you have a robust street network and you add transit and infrastructure, a lot of floor space can be added to improve urban efficiencies and productivities. Okay? Now, we are too much always caught up with the idea of limiting instead of trying to figure out how we will improve our infrastructure. You see, here's Courtsey. It put in a BRTS system, and on both sides, then we could raise up the amount of floor space. Limiting floor space does not stop growth of cities, by the way. Here's San Francisco. In 1939, it had a robust street network. It didn't have a metro. It didn't have nothing. You can see these one-floor buildings and a few high-rises here in center of town. These are 10-floor and 15-floor buildings at that time. And you look at San Francisco in 2004, and they have a huge downtown here. They've built a new metro. They've built new systems for the whole city, rail systems, etc. Same story with Seoul, Korea. They have many road networks, and wherever they could put in, they have increased along some places the FSI up to 10 and things like that. And Ahmedabad is doing the same thing. This is the BRTS network and the metro network, and along the routes of BRTS and metro, we are increasing the FSI. Floor space is not, therefore, need not be limited to lower levels. Street network in the Mumbai plan allows for later strengthening of public transport, later addition of more infrastructure. This will permit more floor space to be added in future. Presently, we are putting in infrastructure only for a 1.33 gross FSI. I'm not talking about plot FSI, gross over the entire area of development. But we believe that later on, the next generation, there are going to be people who will say, oh my God, these people were very timid. Let's put in more infrastructure and build more. And we believe that after that, they will build more. Even when they come to this level, they'll be nowhere near Manhattan, because that has even more floor space. Okay. That doesn't mean there are more people. What happens is people become richer and they consume more floor space as societies become richer. And that's the story the world over, including India up to now. Adding more floor space does not add load to infrastructure. Adding people does. So don't limit floor space. If you can't limit people, just add more floor space. Okay? I don't want to get that into much detail here. Now, here's a very important point of this plan. Indian cities, and I'd like you to look at this particularly carefully, because it's a very important thing that all urban design people should understand. We use our land very poorly. What do I mean by that? You know, if you take, that's Ahmedabad, I showed you, that's Ahmedabad, and we took these 500 by 500 meters square for study. And if I take this one square here in the center of town, as you can see, right next to the river, that's what it looks like. And I'm sure Pune looks like this too, and most of Pune looks like this. And if you were to study the land use here and divide it according to the categories I'm telling you, not what planners use, not residential, industrial, and all that sort of stuff, but like this. First you find out how much is in public streets. Sorry, this has got all completely washed out here, but about 16.8% of the land is in streets. I'm sure Pune gives you similar numbers. How much in public open space? Very little. Streets and open space together make the public domain of a city, and most Indian cities have no more than 20% of their land in the public domain. Okay? Now you must study the building footprints. How much land is below the building footprint, covered by buildings? And here you get 25.6%. Why is building footprints important? Because building footprints do two things. They are the most important. I mean, the ground floor space is the most important space of any building. The more area you have in building footprints, the more ground floor you will have. Anything that people want, they will pay more for. Ground floor is costlier because people want to pay more for it, which means that you must try to maximize that in any city. Anything that people want, you must maximize. Like streets and public domain, you try to maximize. Ground floor space also you must maximize. You shouldn't try to limit it. But we have only 25% here. Where's the rest of this 57% gone? All that 57%, sorry, this is, there's something wrong with the slides here. If you look at this, all the 57% is the private open space that we are forced to leave around buildings because of building bylaws. And that constitutes a waste in Indian cities. All that red land is the private open space that cannot be used legally, and this we end up using suboptimally. You see, all our cities look like this. They have lots of time fragments of space like this. It all adds up to 57%. Nobody makes that calculation. They are making the rules. But the rules end up forcing you to do this. And how do we use these spaces? They are not very well usable. You know, as designers, look at these spaces. These are not, you can't grow trees, you can't play a cricket game here. I mean, you can romanticize about this, but when space is scarce, this is a waste of land. And I urge urban designers to actually walk around in cities and find out how these slivers of land is used. You take Mumbai, you have the same story. You take Nariman Point, the costliest piece, land in the country. This is what it looks like. Once again, if you look at the figures, you see 53% of it is in private open space that cannot be used. Okay, ridiculous. It's very easy to do this research. It's Google Images, nothing else. Okay. Other cities in the world, take London, go and check it out. Here you have almost 30% in the public domain. So already doing 1.5 times better than us. No wonder their streets are walkable and we all go there as tourists. And their building footprints are, what's that, 65%? Okay. They know. People want more ground floor space, so allow. So planners don't stop them from using it, they actually allow them to use it. And then you have private open space, which is very little, which is 4.8. You will see that in every city in the world. San Francisco here has 32% in public streets, and parks and gardens 36% in the public domain. You can see 61% in. Now this will change as you take a square of the city, but this is an average. And private open space is this. We can say that generally speaking, in Indian cities, that's the situation. 20-25% in building footprints, 20-25% in public realm, and a big waste of 50 to 60% in, and this is done by bylaws. Man-made. There's nothing that tells you to do it this way. Now, in western cities, 50 to 55% in building footprints, 35 to 40% in, and 10% in this private open space. No wonder those cities work better. So we have to learn how to make cities of this sort, and this is what their cities end up looking like when the land is used efficiently. That's Lyon. Look at this pattern. Go on Google sometimes. It's a terrific pattern. You can see that all the private space is also really well shaped in the form of courtyards here. You can see you have wonderful streets, you have parks, you have gardens, and you have vast amount of floor space. Okay, that's what we have to try and do. Now, our cities look like this. They are neither garden cities, nor they are cities. And here's Mumbai. I mean, can you believe it? This is a ridiculous waste of land. And this will be Pune, and this will be Delhi, and this will be Calcutta, and this will be every Bangalore. Everything is like this. Ridiculous. And we haven't paid attention to this issue for years. Now the port redevelopment makes very sensible use of land. And by doing this, it turns a zero-sum game into a win-win game. Okay? What we are doing here is saying, if you were to compare the port development to the rest of the island city, here's what you will get. The land in streets in this area here is 36%. In the rest of this city, it's 17%. So we already putting twice the amount of land in streets. Nobody ought to complain. Amount of FSI we have here and here is the same, but we're putting twice the amount in streets. And streets are the most important area in a modern city. That's your public domain. You don't have, any case. The next is parks and gardens. We happen to put, in this case, 26% of land in parks and gardens because Mumbai is starved of it, and 8% of land, rest of the city puts 8%. Okay? So 26 and what's this? 36, 62% in the public domain. And yet I have some people who are purists complaining about public space. This is a development which we are going to do where we monetize land but put 62% in the public domain. Okay, so and if I take the building footprints, 24% in our area, 27% in the rest of Mumbai. So we're not putting in more, we're not concretizing the place. What we are doing is we have undevelopable private land is only 12%, in the rest of Mumbai it's 43%. We are taking all that waste and turning it into gold of public domain. Okay. Now that's the same figure here, giving you here 1.5 FSI, 1.33 gross FSI. So that's what the Mumbai plan is. That's, I think, the winning issue in this plan. And this is what I feel like saying, well, this is how the Midland should have been developed. So instead of urban designers, many urban designers want to be, concerned about the big problems of our day. I am also concerned about the big problems of our day. But I think our job is not to take jandas and go out as activists. Our job is to use design to solve problems. And that's what I propose we are doing out here. Okay. Finally, urban design form. Our cities, anybody looks at our cities, they'll say they're not planned. They don't have any particular form. They're haphazard, disorderly cities. Take one drive around any Indian city and you will say, and you take other cities in the world, well designed, you have some character, some urban form character. You look at Manhattan, it has, it's made up of high rises, and at a street level it works at the top level, it works. You know, that's what a high-rise environment looks like in any well-designed city of the world. Lots of floor space, lots of public domain. That's one type of urban fabric. There are many different types, but in Mumbai, we are using a combination of the high-rise and the low-rise. Low-rise is like this in Lyon. You can see you have well-defined blocks. You have low-rise buildings. You have streets. You have open spaces in the middle. And you know, the streets, at the street level, if you look at it, it will look like this, not very tall buildings. We have examples like this in our cities. Okay, Ballard Estate, when it was built with this sort of a urban design form, thoughtfully. And here you have, every building was done separately, and yet they all added up to make some sense. And so you got a wonderful urban area of this sort that looks like this. It has streets, it has ample amount of space for trees, it has buildings like this, and you know, coordinated arcades. Every building is different. Architects have done their numbers, so to say, but the urban plan has ensured that a form emerges that makes sense. Everybody matches up with everybody else. Okay, and the Mumbai plan is designed to do precisely that. I'm losing contact with this. Okay. It uses, it's like the plan for Ballard Estate. All the blocks have been well thought out, and you have the floor heights are fixed in all of these, and so the volumes are fixed, and it has been thought out in careful detail. Now the architects can go in there and build within that volume. But you know, none of this is possible unless you have good bylaws. So we had a chance to write a new type of bylaws here, and we do not use text-based rules like our normal bylaws. Our normal bylaws look like this. There's not a single drawing mostly in these books. They are all text-based. They are written by administrators and bureaucrats. These are not drawn up. If they are concerned with form, you'll have to draw up your bylaws. That's the opportunity that this project provided. We made a very simple, easy to administer sort of building bylaws. I won't go into details, but here if you can see this drawing, it's not very clear here, but here are the plots. If I zoom in here, sorry for this washed out thing here, but these are the plots. In the plots, these are all the plots that you can see. These are the divisions of the plots. These are the setback lines that have been drawn up. These are the volumes, the development envelopes within which people have to build their buildings. So from day one, the volume within which the building has to be built is done. We know which are going to be the tall buildings, the lower buildings, the higher buildings, etc. All the neighbors know what's going to come up next to them. Inside it, this is the amount of floor space that you can fill up in the volume. Nobody will build buildings like this. The architects will all design separate buildings according to the needs of the client and the site-specific area. And these will all, you know, be optimized to meet the needs of the owner. Then you would perhaps get a landscape like this. This is just speculation. Every architect will do something different. The bylaws actually look like this. There's a set of drawings and there's a set of text-based rules. You will still need text-based rules for certain standards like engineering standards, etc. But height and bulk regulations will all be in the form of drawings like this and of this sort, which indicate clearly, make it easy, just define the development envelope. Okay, many cities of the world do this. Look at the Singapore plan, you will find online. This is how, you know, bylaws always have drawings. Ask for bylaws with drawings. That's what you have to do. Or some of you might later on do more of this elsewhere. I would like to suggest, I've told you what this plan is about, and if it finally goes through, it's slowly making its way slowly through the whole process. Recent political changes have made a little bit of a slowdown in the process, but it's slowly moving ahead. Someday if this develops and this plan is adopted, I think this plan, in a sense, proposes a new urban design paradigm for India. We have been writing our bylaws and making our plans, which is the DNA of our cities, in a way that we get the cities that we have today. The plan and the bylaws already define the city. We are trying to write up a plan and bylaws that define a different sort of city. And that's what I wanted to say here. So we stop, first one done. Oh, that's too much. Vishwanath Dam, Varanasi. I'll go through here. I'll go a little faster over this. That's Ganges. That's Varanasi here. It's an ancient city. Remember that most of the buildings were built only 300 years ago. None of this was built more than 300 years ago. It doesn't come from the time of the Vedas, though there has been population there for a long time. Yeah, it's also a densely built settlement which is struggling. It is severely stressed. There's lots of pollution, etc. Okay. Now I'm going to focus straight away on the Mandel Precinct here. That's once again Varanasi. You can see here that's the Banaras Hindu University, large, big, very different urbanism here, and that's the rest of the city here. Okay, and you have that's what the area of the Mandir looks like, the yellow rectangle there. And if you zoom in here, that's what the area that I'm working on looks like, and that's the drawing of it. That's the Gyanvyapi Masjid, that Kashi Vishwanath Mandir. These are the narrow lanes. That's Manikarnika Ghat here. That's all that's crucial at this stage. If you look at this area, that's what the terrain looks like. That's the mosque. The mandir is here. Manikarnika Ghat is somewhere here. It's on a hill, 100 feet up, 350 meters across. Not a very large area, as you can see. The temple and the masjid, there's a long history of the construction of the temple, its destruction many times. Finally, at one point, Aurangzeb destroyed the temple that was there and built the Gyanvyapi Masjid, and the temple wall was left at the back here, and that's the masjid. That's the way it stands today. And 200 years ago, then Aliyabai Holkar built this new Kashi Vishwanath Mandir right next to that old one. And then it was the shikhar was plated in gold, and then after a Supreme Court verdict, after Ayodhya, the mosque has been protected by this horrendous barricade that you can see all around. The temple sits right next to it, right here. That's the barricade for the mosque on this side. Both are in use. Here you can see long lines of pilgrims, etc. And that's, the temple is here. That's the Kashi Vishwanath Mandir. You can see it has a very, very tight parisar, very tight area for all the pilgrims that come here. Sheikh Bhai Jaul, the mosque and the masjid here. If you look at the drawing, that's what it is. That's the barricade, that's the mosque, that's the character of the precinct. It's densely built. You can see here, if somebody can help me with this, maybe this needs to go a little faster. I'm clicking 3 times before it moves it. Here are very narrow lanes like this. You can see here, there are crowded lanes very often. There are homeowners, shopkeepers, priests, high priests. There are sadhus that come here. Sorry. No, it's just that maybe the battery is low. But that's okay. There are pilgrims. There are many tourists in this area who come here. Here you have the mandir by itself, the mosque next to it. Policemen, lots of policemen here because there are lots of security concerns here. There is lots of filth because the infrastructure is very poor. Lots of this development is just encroachment, you can see. Oops, sorry. What was that? Yeah, lots of animals, lots of open gutters. It's quite a messy area here. You can see here encroachment, particularly this year. You can see an old structure and all of these buildings. It's a low-income neighborhood. It's become a bit of a slum type area. And very poor additions of this sort, infrastructure built by, that's pumping station built by the Public Works Department. The first improvement efforts were made in British times by Princip in 1822. Here you have some drainage schemes done in Varanasi, but not much more has been done after that. And the city has deteriorated over a period of time. In 1916, Gandhiji went to visit the Vishwanath Mandir, and in his famous speech, which you can Google and find, he says that I visited this temple. And he was ashamed that we have temples of this sort with so much filth. Even our temples are not models of roominess and cleanliness. What can our self-government be? 1916 is when he laments the condition of the temple and says something should be done. Nothing much got done. Finally, something is being done, and here is what the design is. First, a jurisdiction was created. That's the authority. That area was carved up. You must remember, all of these work must have sound legal basis, so authority was created, and the mandate was to develop a master plan for redevelopment of this area, purchase properties between Vishwanath Mandir and the Ganga, clear the area and redevelop it to provide a setting befitting the significance of the mandir, provide amenities for comfort, safety, security, provide pilgrimage path leading up from the Ganga to the mandir, provide settings for social, cultural, civic exhibitions, improve ghats, etc. So that was the plan to us. So the master plan was prepared. Here you can see it went through many iterations and revisions, and I'm just going to, and it's not moving fast, but there. You know, master plans are not done. You draw a sketch plan first, then you start testing the idea, and you keep redrawing till nobody does a million studies first and then does a plan. In real life, that's what you do in academic life. In real life, everybody first draws a sketch, and then you start testing the idea. Even if I were to design a home, somebody says, do me a home, that's how you do it. Okay, yeah, I've drawn something, what do you think? And they say, nah, not like that, like this, like that. And then you throw the sketch away and start again. So the sketch kept going on, and finally, that's where it stands. Now let me explain what this is about. That's taking that area and turning it into an area like this. Let me explain different features of it. The parisar is simple. That's the yellow area I'm talking about. Presently, the parisar is that small. That's the sort of the ambulatory around. You can see it's very tight. Hundreds of thousands of people come here, and it's a very, very tight spot here. So we took that area here. We sort of saw the axis of the temple, put two squares around it, straightened it out to align with the mosque, to align with the important structure next to it, made it a little larger, and then put an arcade all around it, and essentially created a larger space around the temple and a parisar that would be pretty much in the traditional form. And that's where it is. Sorry, these drawings are not going to come up here very clearly, so I'm just going to move on to the next one. Hopefully this will come. It takes a little long in this computer. Forget it. Next one. You'll see it later. Outside it, we have this chalk. So we took this rectangle that we had put in, extended it twice the amount here, and created a civic space outside the parisar here, and built a building around it that would hold lots of facilities. For example, large number of toilets, because you need huge number of toilets. And it's pretty straightforward what you want to do when you have to do create facilities. On the upper level, maybe shops, maybe an exhibition place, emporium. I'm not going to wait for this drawing. Let's look at later on, that you will be able to appreciate what this is. There are many approaches to that area. Once on the road, there is only actually just one approach. So there's a street like this to this big temple, and that approach has been improved. Actually, presently the approach looks like that. That's the entrance to Kashi Vishwanath Mandir, by the way. And so that needs to improve and become better. And some sort of emergency vehicles, if they can come in, it will be better. So that's what we have done out there. Then you have a approach from the Ganges side here. That's really on axis to the temple. That's you want to come here and you want to create a gateway. From the gateway, the first thing you see is the shikhar of the temple. That's the gateway. The gateway is designed using one of the local gateways as a model, and so it reminds you of that area. The path leading up from the Ganga up to the temple is, that's you. If you arrive by boat, this is how you will approach it. You will see these large pumping stations, and you will see all of that here. If you come by boat, it's difficult to get off really. So that's not very comfortable to get off at this place. It's quite messy. And then you go up this lane and into a narrow alley, up that place here, and go through these lanes and go to the temple. Okay, but I think now there will be a different approach. There's a wider, larger space. You can climb up these steps. It has to be a pleasant experience so that you come here for a spiritual purpose. And if all the time you have to look down on the floor and see where you're walking, I mean, some people romanticize this, but I think that's not the idea. So that will be the approach that will lead you slowly up to the temple here. And that's that. Why are we not moving? Here you are. So also some escalators for older people to climb up here. And that's the view from when you're up there looking down at the Ganges. It's very poor. There's also cultural civic institutions along the path that you can see here. These are some old buildings that were existing. This one is an old one built also at the same time that the Holkars were building here. Jalasan Terrace, it's called. It's encroached upon by all sorts of housing just now. You can see it's really in poor shape. And that's that structure that's here. And all that needs to be, actually the structure at the back is quite beautiful. One needs to bring it out and use that. Behind that is, there's this old hostel which can be restored and can be turned in. So that's what this area will be. Eventually a terrace up here, that's the old structure here. That's the hostel at the back, a stage here for performances, etc. So that's what. Along the path, there are many other exhibition galleries and places like that. I'm going to leave this drawing and we move up here to this place. The ghats themselves can be, there's much improvement that's possible here along the ghats. They haven't been, taken care of for a long period of time. There are 3 ghats that will, we're not going to take care of all of them. Sorry, here you are. First remove this sewage pumping station and bring this old structure back into the fore, and also create some jetties, a performance stage, so that you really get a much nicer area there. That's Manikarnika Ghat, the most important cremation ground. And that also can do with much improvement. It doesn't have to be like this. What's happening? Okay, so that's here's Manikarnika Ghat, and that's the development that we're talking about. Pilgrims and tourist facilities, lots of pilgrim facilities like food courts, guest houses, places to leave your baggage, places to leave your shoes, locker rooms, so on and so forth. And that's the idea here. Lots of administration security facilities are required, offices are required. So essentially, it's a lot of logistics and a lot of functional improvement in this area. There were lots of temples in this area. So when the houses were pulled down, discovered magnificent temples that had been encroached upon by all the development. So when a lot of people talk about all the heritage being destroyed, they are not really looking at it in the fullest sense of the term. Here you had buildings that had their slabs put on structures like this. And when these buildings were torn down, you found temples inside. There were nicer buildings too, but many of the buildings were just encroachments, nothing else. And that's the temples that have been found. A lot of the later detailing job is about integrating all the temples with the master plan. So the master plan continues to evolve and change after this has been found. The landscape, there were very few trees here, but since it can be quite hot there, we'll plant a lot of trees along this area also. And here's a model that gives you a sense of what this is like. And very quickly, we can show you one film that just takes you through. Can we do that? get on the next one. The project is underway. The properties were purchased and the clearing has gone on. Turn those lights on. That was done long time ago now, and then the project, as everybody knows, was inaugurated some time ago, and the construction is ongoing. I just want to end by saying that's what it was, and that's where the project, that's the change. This is what the fabric was like, this is what the change is. And I just want to put it in context by once again going up and seeing what this project is in the context of the city. There are many people concerned that this project will destroy the soul of the city. And they haven't taken the trouble to figure out what size it is. It's the size of one building. So that's where we are. Finally, the last project. This one I'm quite used to doing. I've been doing these presentations a lot. Let me start straight away. And Ram, how are we doing on time? It's okay, right? Yeah, okay. So here we go. The Central Vista project in New Delhi. It's been in the news a lot. I'm quite happy to answer questions about it afterwards. Let me just show you what this is. See, when Lutyens and Baker, architects of this Central Vista, designed it, they were inspired by Washington's Capitol complex and Paris's Champs-Élysées. They wanted the Vista to be the living center of administration in India and to be an, sorry, spelling mistake, architectural icon for the government of India. That's the Washington Mall, that's Capitol here, that's Lincoln Memorial, and that's about 3 kilometers. Here's Louvre, here's Arc de Triomphe, that's Champs-Élysées, that's 3 kilometers, and here's India Gate, and here's Rashtrapati Bhavan, that's 3 kilometers. Obviously, they were all part of a similar Beaux-Arts sort of tradition of creating an architectural icon for the nation states that were coming into being at that time. That's the architects on a site visit. We now use cars, and that's the ground being cleared. You know, this wonderful flat land was not flat. This entire area, the hills were chopped to create a magnificent space of that sort. That's to be kept in mind because many people believe that these things come up without any sort of major transformation. Standard Beaux-Arts method of designing it, you have a grand avenue with trees. On two sides you set up an axis, then at one end you put a focal point, and the Viceroy's residence was at one end with the north and south block. You have this axis. On the two sides they wanted to put up administrative buildings for all the offices of government. At the end they had India Gate. So that was sort of the basic architectural sort of device that was used. That's what got done in the early 1930s. You can see here, that's the space here. The administrative buildings couldn't be built. That's Rashtrapati Bhavan, that's the Mughal Gardens here. That's South Block, North Block, that's Council House. Okay, Rashtrapati Bhavan at that time was Viceroy's residence. And that's a model of this area as it was inherited by India. Now it's no doubt that the Central Vista, built at that time, was a spectacular architectural achievement. It's magnificent. Even now, after being there so many times, when I walk up Raisina Hill and see the building, it still gives me goosebumps because it's such a magnificent achievement. It was built to house a colonial government and to symbolize the Raj, but it was unhesitatingly appropriated by the people of India and the government of independent India. That's in a sense the Indian genius. That's Mountbatten leaving for the last time, that the flag of India coming up, and on 15th of August 1947, people just swarmed over the hill and took over the buildings and made them their own. The Viceroy's house became Rashtrapati Bhavan. The statue of King George V was removed from the canopy. The canopy stands there at the other end. Council House, that Ram referred to, became India's parliament, was never designed to be the parliament. And north and south blocks house the most powerful ministries of the government of India. Post-independence management of the Central Vista was, however, very poor. It lacked any sort of comprehensive, inspiring architectural vision. Already, during the Second World War and later, the two sites, these plots that were empty originally, were used for barracks-like structures that were coming up because there was need for that sort of space. Delhi was growing. You can see here that's the old city of Delhi in 1942. That's Central Vista here, the 3 kilometers. Then slowly, by 1956, Delhi is growing, and there was a lot of demand for space on the Central Vista. A Central Vista committee was formed in 1962, but unfortunately, the way it was administered was by reducing it to a two-dimensional plot plan. Basically, they were plotting out different plots and giving it to different people to build all sorts of buildings. 1962 picture, you can see here already Vayu Bhavan, Rail Bhavan coming up here. This new street was added, and this is Krishi Bhavan, Udyog Bhavan, Krishi Bhavan, and then those barracks-like structure, National Museum, various other such things. And you can see these trees here, 2 lines of trees. So what we had inherited became like that. Now, if you look at this, it's a disorderly layout of buildings that we have added out here. That's very clear. It's incoherent architecture. It's all different ones, don't add up to anything. A hodgepodge of different uses. You have residences with it, that's the vice president's residence, the administrative facilities, cultural facilities, all rather incongruent and without any particular order. No space for all the ministries to be housed in the Central Vista. Only 22 of the 51 ministry house here. The rest of them are scattered all over Delhi, meaning that everybody has to travel long distances to meet, which means that they often don't meet and operate in silos. Some plots like this were like hutments-like structures, which are called hutments officially, but actually are offices. They're not residential structures. They are inside walled compounds, very nice walls outside, but inside it's a rural, informal setting, very, very poor use of land. Lots of people working there, and facilities that don't necessarily have to be located. Very, very poor use of land. Most of the buildings have a sea of parking all around. If you remember the earlier talk, ground footprint is very, very poor. Inside, if you look at it, that's what the offices look like. And even the access that people used to enjoy, you could walk through these buildings because of security reasons. Access has reduced. Actually, the Central Vista itself is encroached upon by these bhavans to create space for parking. So from behind, the compound walls have been opened up and parking lots have been created on the other side, and some infrastructure has also been put in. Look at the landscape, it's quite lackluster. That's your central iconic space of the country. It's a big civic garden, very important for the people of Delhi, but there are very few facilities for them, such as toilets, etc. If you see here, inadequate facilities for tourists, and nothing like inspiring capital complexes world over. If you go to Washington and spend a day at the mall, it's a memorable, comfortable and memorable day, and you will remember it for the rest of your life. It's a fantastic experience. You go to Paris, it's not the seat of government, but nonetheless, it's an iconic space. You walk up Champs-Élysées, you go to the Louvre Museum here. That's a fantastic experience. Everybody from across the world wants to go there once. Over the years, many people, many institutions have demanded that the Central Vista should be better administered, better developed, better maintained. In fact, people have written up administrative notes saying that these old buildings should be torn down and new ones should be built, and that its heritage should be protected. Nothing was done, like in the Varanasi case. Something is being attempted right now. So what's this project? Let me explain to you what the project is about. Well, once again, master plan for the Central Vista project started with a sketch developed in response to very, very broad requirements, like the Kashi one that I was telling you. Here you have, this is all the information that was provided. There were thankfully good history books, good historians have studied the buildings. From that we could find old maps, and thank God for Google, because without Google what would we do? This has so much information that we were able to build up a model like this from the historical maps and what was in Google, and then we were able to build up a model of what we have done to that inherited space, and then we developed a sketch model for what can this place be. This master plan has evolved over the last 3 months and will continue to evolve as we go ahead and do stuff. Here's what it was on 11th October and 24th October, and it changes on 24th November and 24th December, and so on and so forth. What I'm going to talk to you about is the 3rd of February version of the plan. As we continue to work on it, it will evolve. Plans like, only people who have never done a plan will believe that you can make one perfect plan to start with. You cannot. Only somebody who has not designed a house believes that you can ask all the family members what they want and then come up with a perfect plan. This is ridiculous. You don't do it like that. We know that design is an iterative process, and that's what's ongoing right now. Here it is, 3rd of February plan, and that's what it looks like. Now, what's the objectives of the Central Vista project? And there are 6 objectives. Let me go over them one by one. Modernizing Parliament's facilities is the very first one. If you look at Parliament House, it's this round structure that we all know very well. We tried to understand the existing facilities. We looked at historical drawings. It was not supposed to be round. Baker wanted a triangular arrangement of this sort. Lutyens didn't agree. Eventually a round was built. There are very, very old drawings available, but not in a usable form, so we redrawn all of them. These are old elevations. We have redrawn the elevations so that we can start appreciating their architecture a little better. Of course, all the rooms and adjacencies, what is the space utilization has to be studied, because in India we don't have maps of how these things are done, management systems. We have to study all the protocols, who goes from where does the president enter from, where does the prime minister enter from, so on and so forth. This is the way because it's a complex building. We don't understand all the furniture. People sit down here and sort of, that's the main job and debate. So we have to understand that well. We are trying to understand the later additions. You can see there used to be beautiful windows bringing in natural light. They have of course been closed, and there's this glare from the artificial lights. Baker added, in 56, these 2 floors on top were added afterwards. Now whatever expansion could be done to it has already been done. We studied the expansion possibilities because India's Parliament will at some stage after 26 be expanded to have more members. Today there are 552 seats. You can see that this corridor at the back behind the columns has already been filled up with seats. There is absolutely not a single seat can be added, and that's one of the problems. The central hall of Parliament is actually like this. That's where twice a year joint sessions are held, but the rest of the year it functions essentially as a lounge. This is the place, if you're a friend of MP, that's where you will sit down and have a cup of tea, which is served from this in this corridor here. And this is not the furniture that you would have in a lounge. And you can understand it's not very comfortable to sit at a place like this and have tea and coffee. Any case, when the joint session is held, they have to put in seats in the aisle spaces here. And it's a foreign service officer was telling me that it's very embarrassing when you invite foreign dignitaries to come here and ask to sit on rickety chairs in the corridors here. The equipment here, it doesn't take much for us to understand that this is quite antiquated. If you look at the structure itself, that's what the innards look like. All sorts of additions for air conditioning, for telecommunications, for electrical infrastructure have been made in rather ad hoc manner over the years. There's lots of water seepage. The structure itself has deteriorated in a lot of places. Seismic risk is definitely there because the risk has been ratcheted up. The zone has changed here, and the building, since there are no drawings, it cannot be certified to be safe or unsafe, but it's wise to assume that major retrofitting will be necessary at some stage here. conclusion of this was that this is a terrific symbol of our democracy, but if we want to expand seating, if we want infrastructure modernization, and we want structural safety, a new facility has to be built. And then this present building can be appropriately retrofitted and used also for parliamentary functions. So the two would work together is what we are thinking of. We looked at this plot next to it. It's a triangular plot here, and a triangular building made sense here, given all the functional requirements. Design for this is also ongoing, and if you look at our studio, there are sketches, models of all sorts just now. I'm showing you plans that are not there. We have to tender out soon, but it's still evolving. So I'll show you halfway work. That's what it looks like. This whole diamond plot is presently also a compound of the parliament. It's not, this is not a garden here. It's a parking lot, and infrastructure is out here. So we're going to remove the parking, remove the infrastructure, and build a new facility out here. Officially, I might just mention that officially this plot in the development plan says garden. That is why a land use change is required. Presently, in reality, it's not a garden, but that's what a lot of the debate is about. Very often people forget that files are often. In any case, here you have the Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, you have the central hall here, you have Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, and a lounge here. We are not going to have a central hall. The Lok Sabha is designed to function as a joint session hall, so it has the capacity to seat 1.5 times the number of people, and I'll tell you how we are doing that. That's what the plan looks like. At present, I'm not going to go into details here. That's the Lok Sabha chamber, that's the Rajya Sabha, that's the lounge, there's a central foyer, there are offices all around on this side. Actually, it is much like this plan here, which has offices, a corridor, offices all around Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, Central Hall, and courtyards here. We'll have just one small courtyard here in this building. That's what the Lok Sabha chamber will look like in phase 1, and there'll be more seating in phase 2 when the parliament is eventually expanded. That's what it looks like, the first floor plan. That's the second floor plan. I'm not going to go into details here. And of course, it's we are very interested in making it a geometrically rigorous sort of plan. And so it's a 3.65 meter, finally, after many iterations, we discovered will help us do this job. That's a section through the building. Once again, this is evolving, and many elevation studies going on. We are constantly referring to the building next door. I explain to people saying that we want the two to be related, but we don't want them to be identical twins. We don't want them to be siblings either, but certainly we want them to be cousins of each other. So we are trying out many different things. That's just one quick image of what the two would look like together in this place. The seating layout, we studied many seating layouts world over, decided to continue with the present horseshoe-shaped seating here. This is just a comparison of the size of the present hall and the new hall that is being built. You can see present seating is very poor. You can see here, first of all, it's a bench type seating, continuous benches of this sort. We have here, the seat size is quite mean. Only front 2 rows get a desk. The rest of the people don't get a desk. You have to walk in front of other people and reach your seat, very uncomfortable and disturbs everybody. Of course, you can give no modern equipment like touch screens, etc. If you don't have a desk in front, there's no technology. And so what we are proposing is that there will be benches with only 2 people sitting, but they're wide enough so that 3 people can sit when there is a joint session hall. So you get 1.5 times the capacity. And everybody will get a desk, there will be no movement in front of people, so on. So I'm not going to go into details. There's lots of furniture. These are mock-ups, furniture studies. This is mock-ups of what the ramp will be like. We are doing away with the steps, etc. The technology we are working with a very good acoustic design firm from San Diego. and you can set the mood of a place by the acoustics. This place has wonderful acoustics. It's very different. You should see the acoustics in the present parliament. It's very poor. All they do manage is no echo, but besides that, there's nothing much that's there. There's lots of technology that has to go in, like voting system, analog, visual systems, etc. I'm going to talk about all of that. Of course, the building has to be celebrated. Celebrates our nation and democracy, and maybe someday it will be lit up with laser lights going on. So that's all I'm going to say about the parliament right now. There's a lot more, but I want to go over the plan as a whole. In this plot here, it's proposed to build chambers, offices for parliamentarians. Presently, parliamentarians have no offices for themselves. Of course, the parliament building has offices, but only a few members, the ministers, etc., get offices. The rest of them don't. So in these two plots, there will be 1,000 offices for all the parliamentarians built here with adequate parking, etc. Now, the other big objective is to improve productivity and efficiency of administration. Now, as architects, all of us know this is very important, and architecture plays a big role in productivity. But that's the central secretariat, and that's being built to improve productivity. What do I mean by that? I mean, there are many books, continuously they come out explaining how the architecture of a place will affect productivity and efficiency. And we know this very well, that for productivity, what you need is cooperation. And for cooperation, you need clustering of people, bringing them together, ease of formal and informal interaction, and you need to have less time spent on getting to work. That's what improves productivity. And that's what architecture can do for it. Efficiency, meaning the cost of keeping one seat going, all the energy costs, etc., depends much on facility management practices. For example, if you have shared resources like conference rooms, then your prices of maintaining of efficiency will go up. Scale of operations, when you have large offices, you make more efficiency in technology. Everything from what kind of windows you have to what kind of air conditioning systems you have will determine how much money we spend on a continual basis for maintaining these offices. So the new infrastructure that is being built will bring all the scattered offices into one place here. Present buildings are very, very poor. They've been poorly modified. You can see here, don't feed the monkeys. There's monkey menace in a lot of places. But besides that, very poor service integration that you can see, very inefficient air conditioning, poor parking, poor use of land. In all the security facilities inside, they are like this. I mean, 21st century country, world's biggest democracy. The present scatter of inadequate offices, we want to make a much better secretariat here, and organizational efficiency has to go up and productivity has to go up. Which means that facilities management has to improve, furniture layouts have to improve, services have to improve, skin of buildings have to improve, new buildings, and even the location of buildings have to be improved. So that's all that is being attempted here. And that's what the Central Secretariat is about. That's that place where you try to make it more efficient. The office buildings, there are 10 office buildings here. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but they will house all the ministries here. It's a transit-oriented development. What's important to note is that two major metro lines pass through the center here. There's an underground station here called the Central Secretariat Office station. There will be an underground people mover that will connect all the buildings to the station. So most of the employees can come here by metro and easily get to their office, much in the way that airports in the world have a people mover to move from terminal to terminal. Think of Singapore, think of Dubai. This is not very fancy systems. It's just, actually it's not even a rail system. It moves on rubber wheels, but it's provided power like this. But you can move 20,000 people in an hour from the metro to their office. Go to your basement of level, go up escalators and go to your office. So you don't really need to choke up the streets, and you can enter and exit with ease. The buildings are all inside secure compounds, 4 plots like this holding the 10 buildings. You can see this one here. I'll go into it in a little more detail. If you look at that here, that's the 3 buildings here. All of this is within secure compound. Mind you, these buildings are inside presently walled compounds. No public space is being encroached upon. Okay, this presently already is walled. It's got buildings, only poorly shaped and poorly laid out buildings. There's a loop road inside so that you enter this site from these 4 or 5 places. There are accesses to the basement. There's one continuous basement, half a kilometer long, so obviously you get lots of efficiency with lots of car parking. That's the metro connection to the people mover. There's amenities, there's storage and utilities. If you look at one building, these are large buildings, 155 meters by 134, with a big courtyard in the middle, donut-shaped buildings. With large trees in the middle. You might have noted in the basement that there's no basement in this area, so you can really get big trees. And in the ground floor, you have, of course, circulation through the building like that. It's a simple building. It's nothing complicated here. It's all rationality and all efficiency here. These are the amenities, and this is on the ground floor, exhibition halls and cafes. Then when you go to the upper floor, you get large open plan offices here, and you get modular offices in the cellular offices on the sides. If you take a section through here, they are ground plus 6 floor buildings. A month ago they were going to be ground plus 7, now they're ground plus 6, because as we do studies, we find that this will work better. Presently also from Rajpath, because of the 2 lines of trees, you cannot see any of the office buildings. Even these buildings you will not see. They're just marginally taller than the present buildings. If you take a section through the middle here, you can see this is the courtyard. These are the basements, 2 basements here. There's no basement here, so you can grow trees. Many elevation studies going on. The important thing is it's lower than India Gate here, the buildings. That's the central courtyard with, think of Habitat Center, but with larger courtyard. There's also a central conference center planned here, and the National Archives, that's sort of part of the administration buildings. That's an old Lutyens building here, which will be preserved, and additional, so that's the old building. That's what it looks like today. We'll, of course, refurbish it and retrofit it. It has wonderful spaces in the interior, but obviously this is not enough to have modern archives. Presently, there is not enough storage space. A new facility has been built next to it, but it's not very much in keeping. So that's that new facility which will be brought down, and a more efficient facility will be built next. Then the idea of giving adequate facilities to the Vice President and the Prime Minister. Vice President's residence presently is here. If you were to go there, you would immediately as architects say, oh, we can do better than what this is. We can do better in the sense of just sheer facilities. He has no adequate offices, there's no adequate space. It's all built on a temporary basis and rather poor, like all the office buildings that are there. So this plot was identified. It presently has hutments in this place. It's north of North Block, and the Vice President's residence will come up there, this site here. So that is nothing more about this, because we haven't detailed anything more than this. That's just a sketch at this point. Facilities for the Prime Minister, he lives elsewhere. These 2 plots were identified. They also have hutments presently. The hutments will move, and the Prime Minister's residence would come here. Of course, that would give an opportunity to connect everything at a subterranean level so that the VIP movement doesn't affect the rest of the people. There's hutments in this diamond-shaped plot. Once again, it's a prime plot. You can see on one side is the Parliament, and the other side is this. Here, of course, we will get the Prime Minister's office and a garden here with helipads, etc., because you need adequate offices. The present offices in South Block is simply not have enough space. And any modern facilities, for example, like a conference room or a meeting room, doesn't have anything like that, so you need to put in that. Refurbishing, better equipping the Central Vista Avenue is another objective of the project. The avenue by which we mean this garden in the middle, which is so important, but which has haphazard parking, which has a very tired landscape, which has poor paving, poor pathways, footpaths, ad hoc vending areas, no facilities for tourists, poor quality lighting. We can do better than this, by we I mean as a nation, inadequate signage, inadequate. This water body is dry most of the time, so that's the plan. I'm not going to go into this in detail. Each of these can be a presentation by itself, of course, so that's the proposed landscape. It will be livelier. This already Rashtrapati Bhavan has better landscape. We'll have a better water feature, more facilities for civic users, tourists. Once again, these are things that are still being worked out because the phasing of the work is such that we have to work on Parliament and the office buildings first because they want them ready by 2022 for the 75th anniversary of India's independence. So these areas will have better, more organized parking, pathways like this which are already being built, in signage, better, I understand using some example from Pune here, and planned vending areas here, underground passages for pedestrians so that and in front of India Gate perhaps a better paved plaza than this sort of a road that we have at present which needs to be barricaded. Better lighting like in Lucknow or in Gandhinagar, and better facilities for the national events. It takes 3 months to set up the Republic Day parade arrangements, and that destroys the entire garden, and they start again every year. And then they do. So perhaps we can do better than that. Finally, strengthening cultural recreational facilities. IGNCA, which occupies this large plot here with very small buildings, will move to this plot here across from Hyderabad House and have much better facilities than it has at present. More importantly, the National Museum, which is here at present, which has wonderful artifacts, but a building that has very limited space. This will give way for offices, but the most fantastic, these two spectacular Lakshins buildings here, presently being used as offices, will become the great national museums of our country. This, I believe, is perhaps one of the most important aspects of this project. Calcutta has this Victoria Memorial, which has been turned into a museum. The Louvre, which used to be the Palace of the King, is being turned into a museum. Likewise, this fortress of government, which looks like this, will someday look like this with banners and people walking up to the museum, and this adds public space to the city. This is a North Block, and someday there will be some sort of rocket exhibition here. The axis is also being extended with, by creating a garden on axis here and developing a pathway that you can walk up to this end. And so that's the New India Gardens here, that's part of this project. Also at the other end, near the ridge, this is the very important feature. Presently you can see that's the presidential estate, that's Rashtrapati Bhavan. These are staff quarters for the Rashtrapati Bhavan. There are 1,200 quarters for staff members here. And there is some open area here which has vegetable gardens and a nursery which is to be relocated, so the vegetable garden nursery will come here, and that much land will be carved out from the estate as a public facility where there will be an arboretum of this sort which has glass houses with the endangered species of India. That's the proposal still, but one day it will start looking like this. So the whole idea of this project is to commemorate 75 years of India's independence by extending the sort of vista from the ridge, so to say, to the river, as Latvians had planned, and by expanding public space. Presently, that green area here is the public space of the central vista. By creating the museums and the arboretum at the back, we will be adding 75 acres of public space, and that's a sort of catchy way of saying 75 acres for 75 years of India's independence. And in all of the projects that I worked on, I have the privilege of presenting them, but there are vast numbers of people working with me on all of the projects. This is just the team for, the team a month ago. There is, of course, always the clients. Without working together, none of these things get done. So you have the ministry or the CPWD, fantastic bunch of people that have come together to do this. That's in our office itself. There are so many people. There are lots of consultants, TCE, etc., and some advisors working on the project. So all of the work I've presented really is a work of large numbers of people. I have the privilege of presenting it and leading and working with some terrific leading architects.
Wasn't that a wonderful talk? I think so. A big round of applause to him, please.
It's a great opportunity for me personally to have this young man here, but I must warn you, he's my client. So I have to be very careful what I'm saying. I'm designing some new studios at the CEP University.
May I say something?
Yeah.
You know, ever since I am in the privileged position of being, as an architect, being a client also, now I'm able to tell my clients, my own clients, they say, you know, I have to deal with architects, and I tell you. And that makes me immediately a friend of all my clients. Because they think architects are
Problems. See, he talked about iterations. The CEP studios have gone through 3 totally different designs. The first design had a 9-story research and office building, and it had an auditorium under the studios. Then we redid it, and we still had the auditorium under the studios. And almost in working drawings, I came back from Europe, and he invited me to Ahmedabad. And over dinner he said, hey, let's change everything again. So this idea that projects go through iterations, and that there's rationality behind that, and it makes the project better and better and better, I think that was very important. It's not the first sketch. It's a long process of working with the architect and the clients and the users. The other thing I liked, particularly in the Bombay presentation, the way he showed step by step, doing the streets first, etc. For me, that was an education. I hope for all of you who are studying urban design, that presentation particularly I thought was very educational. That was really nice, you know? So I think what we learned today was about iterations are not just doing things again and again. They're developing what I call intellectual friendships. Now, I've known his family for 51 years, since 1968. I know his father, I know him, I know his son Sean, who's studied at the AA, and I hope will come back soon. And we didn't become friends because we agreed on things. His father and I argued as youngsters like cats and dogs, and out of those arguments developed a really close friendship. Even Bimal and I, he's my client. We have to argue with each other. And out of the arguments, we develop friendships, we become closer, and even we argue with other people. And that's also useful, because we're in a very dangerous world. Sometimes you need friends to stick up for you and argue together with you. So the most important thing, let me say about this young man, he makes things happen. All of my other friends talk and talk and talk. I've made up a word, I call them the chatterati. All over India, all of my friends, if I go to Delhi, Ranjit Siddiqui, Pradeep Satyadam, everybody, chatterati says, have you heard about the Central Vista? I'll say, no. And then they tell me, I'll say, well, can you tell me anything bad about the project? Actually, they don't know. Everyone in Delhi cuts and pastes. Everything is bad. Anything new is bad. They don't look at it carefully. They don't look at it rationally. So what I like about this young man, he goes to Delhi. He's going to go to the Indian International Center. Invite everybody. Let them say what they want to say. He's confident that he can answer their questions. So I like the fact that he builds things. CG Road was the first really fantastic urban design intervention. The Sabarmati River is a beautiful place. The people of the old city had not even 1 square inch of gardens. They can walk down to the river. It's a lake in the city. And Bimal, I would like to congratulate you. Thank you for making this presentation. I think you've been doing wonderful work.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. I think we had a wonderful evening. I wasn't expecting at all this kind of crowds, honestly. I think what encourages is that despite all the fears of every kind of, every kind of fear that we have been hearing about, I could see people sitting in the aisles. You have encouraged us to kind of, conduct this program. Thank you once again.